say now that we're live? 10:04.
Exactly.
Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? Although
who's bossing it now?
I'm hesitant to say anything about a Hoosier.
Yeah.
Trying to offend all of our Indiana friends right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Stinking Hoosiers.
Hoosiers.
I really am frustrated that we cannot edit the description.
What is the deal? What did they change? See, I've never done that. I know you said it a couple weeks, but I've never done it before. Like, is it in the when you get ready to send it out? Like,
you used to be able to used to be able to click edit post, like the little 3 dots in the corner.
Yeah.
So like it's got the 3 dots in the corner. You click it, it's got the drop down things, whatever, and it can tell you just all the things you can do, whatever, delete the post. And so it used to say edit post. Now it says edit live video, and it takes you to like the dashboard.
Yeah.
And so it's got like who's watching, what's going on with it, whatever. And to my knowledge, there is no place to just edit the description.
So we're reaching out right now to all of the wise guys and gals. We need some wise guys.
Right. So what I have to do is I have to share it from the Dillingham group,
edit it,
and put the description in the edited post.
So crazy. Hippopotamuses. Yeah. So. That's a glitchy thing.
It's a glitchy thing. It shouldn't happen, man.
No. They should do better than that.
Okay.
For the high price we pay for this service.
Big time. Big time.
Did they ever do, speaking of wise guys, did the Three Stooges ever do a Christmas special?
Ooh. That's a really good question.
Like instead of the Three Wise Men, like the Three Wise Guys.
Oh, they had to have, right? How do I not know that?
Yeah, wise guy. I mean, it's you know what I'm saying?
Right. Once again, we need our great listeners to help us out here and tell us that.
Right. That's exactly right.
Click the share button. Let's go. Duh.
I'm gonna fix this funny thing behind me here.
What funny thing is it?
Hey, I will tell you something interesting.
What is it?
So anyway, I was on the podcast last week, and so Dan was on it. There was another guy.
Oh yeah, that was your podcast you were telling me about.
Yeah, there was what was his name? It's so funny. I got the name Noah in my head. I don't think his name wasn't Noah, but anyway,
Noah Walk Up.
Yes, and I told him, I said no, and I said, man, I said the guy who had the best voice in this group talked the least. So anyway, when we were done, and so anyway, I told him, I said, man, your microphone sounds so stinking good. And he said, well, what it is, he said it's actually the I don't think he said newer version, but he said I think it's called like let me see here, the Shure MV7. So ours is a SM7B, right? His is an MV7. And he said what it is, he said they actually made the Shure. What they did was they took the Shure SM7 and they did a couple of things to it. He said, number one, he said the XLR, they kept the XLR so you could run it through like you normally do, like the SM7. He said, but then they also added a USB-C plug so that you could plug it straight into your computer.
Okay.
And he said, you don't need your cloud lifter, whatever. He says what they did was they changed the diaphragm positioning. They changed it, moved it closer maybe.
Okay.
He said, so it's got the same size diaphragm, so it has the same quality, but they kind of moved it closer to the edge, not as deep into the mic. And he said they hotted it up a little bit so that you don't need like a cloud lifter.
Okay.
And so he told me, he said, I will tell you something. He said, I've listened to your podcast. He said, I will tell you this much. He said, your brother's microphone sounds so much better than yours, because he said he's got his gain way hotter than yours. He said, you need to turn your gain up. He said, you're not pushing your microphone enough. And so I've had mine. So where is your set, just for reference?
So it is. So which dial, like on the microphone input or on
on the input, like where you talking, it's either green or yellow or whatever.
Yeah. So if you look, so it's at 3:00.
Right. That's what he said. Mine was at noon. Is that funny?
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's
so
wild.
he said you will help your dude that does your editing. He said you'll help him a whole lot if you merge your gain with his.
See, that's why we appreciate
the
experts, right? They
so
help
funny.
us. Yep. Everybody helps us. All right, I'm going through here and doing I'm sent to anybody and everybody.
Share.
Word share.
Oh, for real. Connor Brown said, if Ken nerds out about mics like this, I can't imagine how he is with golf clubs.
You have no idea. You have no idea. Do you remember the conversation we had last week about fish?
Yeah.
About Siberian fish?
Yes.
Do you have any Siberian fish nuggets to drop on us?
Actually, here's what's so funny. Actually, after we talked about it, because the fact that
no doubt about this.
I actually went back and I went and searched it, and I found that it's the Yupik language. And they're Siberian. They're on the Chukchi Peninsula. And so I went back and I watched it. Chuck E. Cheese. So, hey, Connor, do you know? Hey, do you know why? Do you know how the coefficient of restitution, which is the USGA maximum allowable limit on a driver? Do you know how the coefficient of restitution, how it coordinates with a smash factor of 1.50? Maximum smash factor is 1.50 when you go do your, like if you go on a TrackMan and you're testing out a club. So
you're just showing off now, bro.
No, for real. The coefficient
showing off now.
The coefficient of restitution is the amount of flexure in the club face. So it's kind of the rebound effect. And it's and so there's a I'm not going to get into the math of it, but there's a percentage, and that percentage equals 1.50. So here's the deal. So if you have 100-mile-an-hour swing speed and you're hitting the ball exactly on the sweet spot with a square strike. So like you could hit one with a little open face and it doesn't quite, all the energy doesn't quite go into the ball. Like it may be a little open, or it might be, you know what I'm saying? So, but if you're hitting it perfectly square, like boom, like that, on exact sweet spot, if the club is maxed out, 100-mile-an-hour swing speed should produce 150-mile-an-hour ball speed.
There you go.
Which, by the way, at 2,400 backspin and 12 degrees of launch angle, will actually produce almost a 300-yard drive at just 100-mile-an-hour swing speed.
Thanks, Connor. You have unleashed the monster.
Don't do that, bro. Bro, that was almost a Cafe Americano
on the screen.
I'm not going to tell you what I just started to say. My God.
I'm glad you held it in there. Connor, you have no idea. Don't get him started about like what clubs are made of and all that kind of. I'm glad the filter just
I
kicked
know,
in.
I know,
Oh my
because that's where
goodness.
it almost ended up, and I almost did that, and I'm like, that wouldn't
Ooh,
have been a good word. No.
no. Oh boy. Wowzers.
Yep.
I think we better get started. We were
3,
on
2,
it 10.
1.
We were on it. We were on it 10:04, which was amazing, and it's 10:14. So
Yeah.
here we go. I think we need to get started before we get into too much trouble. Yeah, any other golf stuff
No.
you want to drop on
No.
us, or
No. No.
any other Americana stuff you want to share?
No. But for the first time, interestingly though, for the first time, they're actually having to look at this in irons.
Mm.
Because some of the new hollow body irons and stuff that they're doing is actually they're producing similar. It's producing a similar effect as some of the driver stuff. So.
Almost says now talk coffee.
Bro.
No, we're not going to do this. Dude, we were in Ireland at a market in Belfast. I think it was Belfast, right? Yeah, it was Belfast.
Mm-hmm.
We're at a market, and it was like this just massive assortment of every kind of coffee bean you could ever imagine. And my brother was going from group to group explaining the difference of each bean and how you know what the flavor is, the flavor, what's the word I'm looking for? Profile is, and you know why if you like this kind of coffee, you want it from here in this location, why this. It just never stops.
And why certain beans are better to be used at dark roast and certain are better in mild light roast.
See, this is just proving that I'm the pretty face of this, and you're the brains behind all of what we do here. So,
bro, it proves that I would win useless Jeopardy.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
if they had Jeopardy, if they had like Jeopardy / who cares or Jeopardy # who cares, I'd be up in there.
See, but this is somewhat useful information. I'm the king of just total and complete useless information.
No, you are astounding. You are astounding. See, here's the thing. Something for me has to matter.
Yeah.
Like it has to matter to me personally.
Right.
Or you have the ability, you've got like this strange Velcro brain.
I've been told that before. I have a strange brain.
Like Velcro brain, like certain things
they just stick. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing. We better get rolling. Ready to go? Let's do it, man. Let's do it. All right, here we go. Hit the share button, people. Hit the share button. Get the word out. Let's do it. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Chris Dillingham alongside my big brother, Ken Dillingham Jr. the third on this beautiful December morning. How we doing today, Ken? How we doing in Dayton, man? You rocking and rolling today?
It's good. It's finally we've had a morning, and I'm like expecting it to happen or wanting it to happen. Finally have a morning that feels like winter. It's been I've been getting up walking the dog, and I'm like,
it's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. Isn't it amazing? It's wonderful.
50 degrees and whatever, and I'm like who needs Florida right now?
Man, I'm telling you, and so I kind of have this motto of like, you kind of get through December. Usually, like we'll have a snow November, December, but then it kind of melts away really quickly, so it doesn't really matter. And so I'm like, man, the farther we can get towards March, just like I can hold it out, right?
Dude, you never believe this. I just told Stephanie last night. I told her, I said, babe, think about this for a second. She said, what? I said, okay. I said, we're mid December. I had her read for me the next 10 days.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's like 30s, low 30s, whatever. And I'm like, okay, look, we go past Christmas. We get to January. I said, babe, think about this. I said, you start having little 50-degree days peeking their head out again at the end of February for early March. I'm like, we're almost through this.
Yeah, bro, I'm telling you, that's the way I survive winter, man. I'm like, every day into January where there's no snow is one day closer to March, just where we've made it through. So, and I
almost bought you a happy lamp, by the way, for Christmas.
Did you?
I looked them up the other day. I searched it up and whatever. And I did some research and found out that they're actually not much different than a full spectrum LED light. So I'm like, why am I going to spend $50 when I could buy them like a dozen Pro V1s? Why spend $50 on a Happy Light when I could go to Lowe's and buy them a full spectrum $4 LED light bulb?
There you go. Right. For real, man. It's been an interesting morning already. We revisited Siberian fish. Hummel posted Trans-Siberian Fish Orchestra. We've had conversation. We had a tutorial about, what did you call
coefficient restitution?
Coefficient restitution on golf clubs. A scientific explanation about trajectory and club speed and all of those kinds of things. So you can, that's why you got to jump on early, man, because there's bombs being dropped on the pre-show.
Hey, are you ready for this? Do you know what the kind of fish was that they were? So what happened to us? It was the last.
Here we go.
No, for real. Listen, this is so funny. The community comes together. It's the coldest place on the earth. That's why it's fun. That's why it's interesting.
Coldest place on the earth.
Yes. I mean, you could actually search it up. Okay. Look, we're going to do this live, proving
man,
the coldest place on the earth
is.
Okay. So watch this. It says northeastern Siberia, towns of Verkhaneysk and Oymyakon.
I think I remember those places from the game of Risk.
I know, right? But here was the deal. What's interesting is that these people, Oymyakon is the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth and found in the Arctic Circle, northern pole of cold. It said, so here's the deal. It says in 1933, it recorded its lowest temperature of minus 67 Celsius.
Oh my.
Right. So what they said
Celsius?
was they said right. That's like 90 something. Right. And so they said they don't send the kids to school if it gets lower than 55. Minus 55.
Minus 55.
I'm like, well, that's nice of you. So anyway, what they do is they get together and they have before the winter comes because and their water supply, like they can't have a water. There's a lot of fresh water in that area and whatever, but they can't because there's nowhere that they can put the pipes that it doesn't freeze.
Right.
And so they have to actually they have like ice houses and what they do is they're not heated or like cooled obviously, but they keep their fish in there. And so it freezes. And so it's like this open air refrigerator type thing. And they have these blocks of ice and they bring the blocks of ice in and they put them in these like vats and they crunch them up and whatever. And then it melts. So they heat their house with wood and whatever. So they go before the winter time comes because they do hunt, but even the animals, it's even too cold for the animals.
Right.
And so they fish, right? And so they go and have this community fishing thing. It's a huge deal. And they catch these fish and then they distribute it equally to all the people. They work together and whatever. I found out what the fish were.
Yeah.
Carp.
What?
It's carp, bro.
No.
And they're like, and they're eating it and they're like, this is good. That was my best.
That was your Siberian accent. That's amazing. They're eating carp?
Like, carp.
What?
Hey, when it's cold as all get out, even carp tastes good.
You don't even care. Hey, we used to go, our stepdad used to go down to the spillway at Kaskaskia River down by Carlisle Lake and pull in all kinds of carp, man. That's crazy, dude. So how bad is it, man? Not only do you live in a place where it gets minus 67 degrees Celsius, but a delicacy is carp.
Right. Right. They're not even eating like tuna and salmon and whatever.
Right. Yeah. So the next time you complain about it being cold or whatever, just remember you don't live in Siberia or whatever you said it was.
That's exactly right.
That's awesome. So there you go. This is the Mobilized Church podcast. This is not your resource for Siberian information, but you just never know what you're going to get.
Just never know.
Just never know what.
Never know. We may
what
share next
rabbit
week.
hole
We may
you're gonna
just
go
simply
down.
share carp recipes. That may be our show next week.
There you go. Or more Siberian stuff. Who knows, man? Who knows? We appreciate everybody jumping on and being a part. We were on early, but we got sidetracked. I know that's hard to believe. We got sidetracked a little bit, so we're a little bit behind today. But it's going to be a great conversation, great discussion. So you can help us out by going and hitting that share button. I mean, people already missed this. I mean, I think this is a Hall of Fame worthy introduction to the podcast, but they can catch it up later.
You can put that into the comment section. That's literally the video. I'm sure people will, after this podcast, they'll probably want to go and watch this. It's the YouTube. It's the Yakutia documentary movie about life in Yakutia, the coldest inhabited region on Earth. Hey, they've actually gotten a colder day. It says with the lowest recorded temperature of -71 Celsius.
Wow. Boom.
Hey, and it's the little boy. And the thing on the deal, it's the little boy, and he's brushing his teeth, and he's the one. He's like, he good. That's the little boy.
He good. There it is. I mean, that's your Siberian accent.
Sound like he was a little bit from the Yakutia ghetto. He said, yeah.
Wow, man. All right, let's get going. Let's move forward.
Let's go.
Oh my goodness. So we do appreciate everybody being on and being a part of the conversation. So we're gonna today, you're on fire today. You are on fire.
I better just shut up.
No, we like this. We like the unfiltered version. There was a moment where we almost got banned from Facebook if there was a comment that was made. So thankfully,
yes,
filter kicked in and whatever. So here's what we're gonna do. Since you're on fire today, bro, we're gonna change it up a little bit. We do this every once in a while. I'm gonna have you do the introduction to our conversation. It really is gonna be a great conversation. I know it's hard to tell by the introduction, but it's gonna be a great conversation today. So why don't you just dive in and set that up for us?
Awesome. Well, at Christmas time, here we are at Christmas, and one of the things that we hear a lot on.
Hey, can I just interrupt you real quick? This is why ADHD is our superpower, because we can go from Siberian carp and your ghetto comment, and you can just flow right back into.
When you said to go, my brain literally, something inside my head went shoot like that.
It flipped.
Yeah. So
that was wonderful. Great transition.
So, what we find is during this time of year, the focus and emphasis on the incarnation story, the nativity, and the shepherds were keeping watch over their flock by night, the angels appearing in heaven, singing their song, peace on earth, goodwill to men. And so much of what we talk about that nativity story, about Christmas and whatever, is this idea of peace. And so recently I was doing, I was actually doing a devotion on Advent. I hadn't really spent a whole lot of time talking about. We don't really focus in our particular faith tradition. We don't really focus a whole lot on the quote unquote the seasons, the Christian calendar seasons, the season of Advent. but as I got to looking into it, I realized that Advent is a pretty amazing thing. And it's actually not just simply looking at the coming of Christmas, but it is looking at the coming of, so Advent is looking for the coming of the rule and reign of the King of Peace. And then of course, looking forward beyond Advent that he's coming back. So it's really interesting. So there are four primary things that are focused on during Advent, and that is hope, peace, joy, and love. And those are the sort of the 4 weeks of Advent leading up. And so when I looked at when I did the devotion and I looked at peace, it just, my mind was stirring about the fact that, there's obviously, as I mentioned, there's so much about peace in the Christmas story, the story of the nativity. and who Jesus is. It associates back with, right, the Isaiah 9 prophecy. Unto us a son is born, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulders, right? He'll be wonderful counselor, mighty God, Prince of Peace, everlasting Father. And it says, and of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. And so we find that this idea of peace is actually central to the arrival of Jesus into the world.
Yeah.
And so today, I just think it's a good idea for us in this season to talk about peace, not just in a theological context, not just in an Advent context, but as we've mentioned on this broadcast so many times, that as some have said, what are you going to talk about when you are done talking about discipleship? And we said, look, it's all about discipleship. And so this is today's topic is about peace, but we want to focus on that because in the world in which we live today, man, I think it just reminds us, Chris, that everything is about discipleship. And it is about the rule and reign of Jesus. And it is about him producing the kind of peace in our lives that only he can bring when his rule and reign is in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the conversation, like you just said there, about everything runs through that filter of discipleship, right? Because yes, we talk about, this podcast talks about how to build a discipleship culture in your church, for leaders and pastors, how to build a movement within your body where you have the culture of the kingdom that produces disciples, fully devoted followers of Jesus, being conformed in the image, that make disciples, living on mission every day where you live, work, and play. And the reason, like you said, everything runs through that filter because there are places in us that are not like Jesus, and there are places in us that, we don't fully possess everything that he desires for us to have. And I think peace is one of those very fundamental concepts that we see, especially in our world today, right? And there's so many aspects. I was thinking,
Chris,
when you sent me that, and we're kind of I was kind of thinking through it. My first thought was this: it's really interesting. Everybody in the world seemingly has this intuitive desire for peace.
It's true. Very true.
Wonder why.
That's very true.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
do you think it has to do with the conflict that we see immediately after sin? Like the sin in the garden, right? Like Adam and Eve is in conflict with each other. Eve is in conflict with the serpent. He says, you're going to be in conflict. I put enmity between you and the serpent. And then he says to Adam, I'm going to put conflict between you and the ground.
Yeah.
It's not going to yield its full produce. It's going to bring forth thorns and thistles. You're going to eat your bread by the sweat of your brow. Cain and Abel are in conflict. And so we have a world like the Bible says, the whole world is waiting for the redemption of sons because this King of peace is going to bring peace. And so there's something so if the earth groans, if creation is groaning for the redemption of sons, why? Because it's not in a state it was intended to be. And so the state that we're in, both spiritually and like the relationship of nations and people groups and whatever, it's maybe that's why. Maybe we sense it naturally that way.
I think that's it. I think we just know intuitively we live in just such a chaotic world. We live, especially the hour that we're living in, where everything changes so rapidly. When you study like the rate of change over generations, it used to be change, I can't remember how they would word it, but basically the rate of change was like every century you would have like some kind of major transformation in society that altered society. It was like every 100 years. And then it started speeding up, right? Industrial revolution.
Every 10 years was what would have been like, so they were saying like 10 years from 1950 to 1960 would have been equivalent to 100 years from 1800 to 90. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. And then now, the pace of change is is almost like monthly, not even annually. It's monthly now. And I just think that there's, and then you add on top of that just the chaos in our world, political chaos, socio-political chaos, all of that kind of stuff. And there's something intuitive in us that craves and desires calmness. And I want you to maybe talk about this, Ken, about the misunderstanding about peace, right? Because so again, I was just kind of thinking through. So why is it intuitive to us? Why do we desire that? I hadn't really considered that piece of, like, from the very beginning of sin, when that conflict was introduced into our world. It just maybe something genetically is kind of put in us because of that.
Everything's in conflict with everything, right? The whole creation knows.
Always.
I think that's
we're
what
in conflict with the earth. Right?
That's what I think, Chris, is what you're saying there is so important for us to highlight as we really launch into this conversation today. Is I think it's important to notice that the earth groans. In other words, all of God's I think what that's saying is all of God's creation knows
everything.
that this isn't the way it was intended to be.
Yeah. And then, the Bible tells us that this, one of the signs of the end times is that people are going to become desperate for peace. They're going to cry out for peace. And so that as we move closer, so we're moving farther away from that initial place, but we're moving closer to the coming of the Lord, where peace is an identifying factor of the new heaven and new earth, right? What's one of the descriptions that he gives? The lamb and the lion.
That was my first thing I was going to say.
Right?
Yeah. So you keep on talking because you just took my stuff.
Well, they're gonna lay down together because there's no more conflict there.
The child is going to play with the what is it? Says the wild adder or the
something like that.
Poisonous snake.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
because
venomous creature, I think maybe is what the Greek says. Yeah,
conflict has been removed and whatever. But as we move closer and closer, it's interesting. As we move closer and closer to that, perilous times, more conflict, it becomes increasing, and yet the craving and the desire, right? One of the signs in the times, I think is it 1 Thessalonians 5 maybe or something like that says that in the last days they'll cry for peace.
Yep.
And so there's something, again, intuitive as we draw closer to that end time. There's this hunger and desire, but I don't think, even from a Christian perspective, I don't think we really truly understand what peace is, what the peace of God is, what the peace of God means for us. So I want you to kind of lay that out, and let's launch into the conversation about, having a true understanding about what the peace of God is.
Man, that's so good. And I think that scripture that you were talking about is, he said, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them. That's as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. And it says, and they shall not escape. And what's interesting is I think this is so vital for us as we think through this and walk through this, that God, one of the first acts that God performed was that they were not able to go back into Eden. And I think that there is a tendency in humans to recreate peace on earth as a recovery of what was lost. And I think it's so important for us to understand, as we talk about peace and we talk about the coming of the Lord and we talk about the nativity and we talk about incarnation, we talk about Christmas, that it's important for us to understand that that's what the baby in the lowly manger had come to recover.
Yeah.
And so we can't back our way back into utopia. We can't back our way back into Eden. In fact, God even said, he put an angel at the entrance that leads to the tree of life, because he said that they might try to enter back and they eat of the tree of life, and then basically they're locked into this state forever, which is an amazing theological concept. And so that God gives humans death as a portal of ultimate transformation, which is just the brilliance and genius of God.
Right.
So we want to get life. And so he says it's going to come through death. And it doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't make sense to to our human minds, we try to reinforce our lives. And I think it goes with all that we're talking about goes along with that, as far as peace is concerned, that people are looking for this way to somehow find their life. Jesus said, if you find your life, you're going to have to lose it, right? If any man desires to save his life, right? He said the
Yes.
person who tries to save their own life is going to lose it, but the person who lays down their life, who gives up their life, who renders their life willingly, will find it. And so there's this incredible paradox. And I think it is in that there's this, it's almost like the Abel sacrifice. Abel, not ABLE, but ABEL, the person Abel, firstborn of Adam and Eve, that Abel offered up an offering, and that this offering that he offered to the Lord was acceptable. It was a lamb. It was the only thing. Everything had to go into that. And so I think this idea of humans who try to find peace and safety, I think this may be what it's talking about, Paul's referring to in 1 Thessalonians 5, right? But the Bible said, when they cry peace, peace, then sudden destruction. When people are demonstrating, we have found peace, we've created peace, it goes back to the Tower of Babel. It goes back to this idea that we're going to build something. We're going to build a society. We're going to build a structure. We're going to build an economy. That's going to be safe and free of whatever.
Right.
And
Well, the
God
Tower of
says,
Babel was free from judgment, right?
they
We
wanted to,
don't judge us again.
they're going to climb up to the top of it so that no matter how much water God puts on the earth, they'll be able to go high enough that they could escape that judgment. And so I think that what we have to understand is that one of the things that God calls us as humans to do is to declare his sovereignty.
Yeah.
His sovereignty is wrapped up in this phrase, I am. Right? So
Right.
I am that I am. So the I amness of God is a demonstration and display that he is the Redeemer. He is our security. He is our peace. He is Jehovah Jireh. He is Jehovah Shalom. He is so that's and I don't want to get into the weeds with the incarnation and what that means theologically. The bottom line is this: God calls people to glorify him as the I am by first declaring that I am not.
Absolutely.
I can't declare God as the I am while I'm trying to declare for myself that I am.
Man,
I am enough.
So
I am able. I can produce my own. When I say I can produce my own security, I can get rich enough. I can become famous enough.
There you go.
And so it's us trying to assert I amness.
Yes.
And what we really have to do is we have to bend our knee at this is why it's about the rule and reign of Jesus Christ, Chris.
Absolutely, man. Jay Jones said, Jesus said, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you. Yep. And I think that's a really good point. Like you're saying with Abel, right? What ends up happening is we run. What did Abel do, or Cain do rather? What did Cain do? Cain ran it through the filter of, well, I'm not giving you second best. I'm giving you good enough. Like this should be fine. And so what happens is our humanism, our human thinking, like you're talking about, that if we become the I am in our lives, then what happens is we run it through that filter, and then substitutes become good enough.
Yes.
And I think that as it pertains to peace, I think you can see that just in every place in society, like you said, that we start looking for those substitutes that we think are going to bring us peace, whether it's, I'm going to make enough money so I have financial security. Well, what's the flaw in that is that it's kind of a proven fact that you can have enough money and then be fearful that you're not going to continue to have enough money. Right?
Mm-hmm.
or you find out that that money doesn't bleed, the security that comes from financial security doesn't bleed over into relational security or other places in your life. And so you can
or it produces more insecurity.
right.
You think you want to have a bunch of money because I've never had money and I've always felt the insecurity of lack. And then
Right.
all of a sudden you work your hind end off and you get, very, very, very wealthy. And now you fear losing it.
Yeah, you feel I don't want to go back to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Or you could get to a place where you're like, "Oh, I'm financially secure," but
Mm-hmm.
you still have, chaos in other places in your life and
Yep.
whatever. And I just kind of looking at our world, we see it so much. There's a movement on to try to create, a, a, a an absence of war, an absence of conflict, if we can
Mm-hmm.
just remove this out of it. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the big movements that's happening right now in our world, secularism, humanism, is we gotta remove Christianity, right? So what's
Yeah.
the goal? What's the goal of the end times? There's going to be one world religion.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because religion is what causes conflict. If we can just
Yep.
have everybody, in agreement on religion, now there's going to be peace. We can have peace in this world. And the reality is all of those things are inadequate substitutes for what you said, the I amness of God.
That's right.
None of those can ever fulfill. And that's why Jesus said, I don't give you peace like the world gives you, because the peace that the world gives you, it always comes up short.
Yep.
It might bring peace for a season or in one area or in one place, but it can never be the completeness, which is what you shared about what peace is, and maybe
Yeah.
talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
It's not just peace does not just mean the removal. Our definition, our view of it is like, from the 1960s Vietnam peace protests, right? What
Mhm.
was it? Stop
Yeah.
the war,
Stop the
stop
war.
conflict,
Yeah.
remove war, remove conflict, and then we can have peace. But that's not the peace of God. So you want to talk about that?
Well, that's absolutely, man. Here's the thing, and Pastor Tony Richard talks about the three dimensions of peace: peace with God, which is being in proper spiritual order; peace with the peace of God, physiological order; and peace on earth, relational order. And I think, I think that points to sort of this holistic peace that we're referring to
Yes.
today.
Yes.
Peace. So when we think of peace as the absence of conflict, the problem with that is that that's not the peace, kind of like what Jay Jones was hitting at, not in that Jesus promised in John, was it 14 or 15? And by the way, Cain was the firstborn. What's interesting, because Cain was the firstborn. I think I said Abel was, but Cain was the firstborn. Abel was the secondborn, which is part of the reason why I think that Cain was angry that Abel's offering was accepted. And
Yeah.
also, it just kind of speaks to this idea that what's born first in our life isn't going to be the redeemed part. That
Sure.
first one has to die. So anyway, the so when we think about peace, we have to start with this idea, this biblical idea of what peace is, and God in His wisdom sort of wrapped up this idea in the Hebrew word shalom,
Yeah.
right? And so you've heard people say shalom, shalom, but biblically, the concept of shalom, right, goes far beyond just the mere absence of conflict.
Right.
Shalom, biblically, the Hebrew word shalom includes, obviously, it includes the elements that create peace, right?
Yeah.
In other words, it is the absence of conflict at the core, I suppose.
Sure.
But the word shalom in a broader sense actually incorporates understanding what often disturbs us and what is needed to produce wholeness or completion, right? So for example, in the word shalom, a stone wall is said to be in a state of shalom when there are no breaches in it or there are no missing segments, right? Or even on a smaller scale, a stone is
Yeah.
said to be in a state of shalom when it's shaped properly and it has no weakness and cracks and it's well fitting for its purpose, right? So and then there's a larger, broader sense, and kind of connecting this with what Tony Richard was saying. Another element of peace also deals sort of with the complexity of things, right?
Yeah.
Life's hard. There's a lot of interworking parts. And so when all things are working together properly or in harmony, then it's said that life itself is said to be in a state of shalom or peace, right? So, so because life is complex and there's so many dynamics, and at any given time, right, any number of things could break down. So this means that that our peace is affected by the condition of life's moving parts. So, like you said, it could be money, it could be relationships, it could be health, it could be world conditions, and so on and so forth, right? So here's what shalom means. When things that are important to us or that are vital to our survival are attacked, right? Things like relationships, job security, financial stability, some of the things you mentioned earlier, right? When these things are weakened or broken or out of alignment, then it is said that our shalom breaks down or our peace breaks down, right? So true peace is only really restored when wholeness returns to these places.
There you go.
And that's what Jesus is trying to do, right? It's not, well, let's get rid of Christianity and we'll get rid of the source of all conflict or world religions or whatever, which is a lie, by the way. All major wars have been started by, no, that's a lie. Adolf Hitler proves that. So, but I just want you to, I just want our listeners to just sort of think through this idea that what God's trying to do, what Jesus is trying to do when he said, I've come to seek and save that which is lost, is really actually that initial shalom.
Yes.
That God made Adam and Eve in and called it very good.
Man, when you sent this to me and I was kind of reading through it, the first thought that I had was and I, again, maybe not the path some people thought we were going to go down on this podcast or this discussion, but I think this is such a crucial and critical conversation as disciples of Jesus, because just by observation, it seems like that, and I'm going to lump myself into this, right?
Yes.
We don't live with, I think, a continuous sense of the peace of God in our lives oftentimes.
This is a good point right here. This is where it gets to discipleship, bro.
Right. And so, obviously there are a lot of factors on why that is. Mm-hmm. And, maybe we can just kind of dive into that. But I really believe, like what you're talking about there, I think a lot of it stems from our misunderstanding of what shalom is, our misunderstanding of what the peace of God is in our life. We don't understand it. So what we think is the only way I'm ever going to have peace in my life is if I can remove every obstacle, if I can remove every issue, if I can remove the people that, man, bro, I get so frustrated. Can I go on a rant for a minute? I just want to go on a rant. Here's my rant.
Rant out.
I get so frustrated with all these silly, ignorant. I'm just going to call them ignorant. Can I call them ignorant?
Ignorant is, they're ignoring they're ignoring facts or reality.
There you go. Stupid social media posts. And we as pastors and leaders need to be careful. But all of these posts about haters.
Yeah.
And I don't understand this. Like, I just saw a video the other day. I don't understand all this kind of stuff about, man, there's just some people that can't go where God's taking you. And I understand some of that and I get all that. But we've produced this mentality that the only way you're ever going to get the peace of God in your life is if you remove all of the obstacles and all of the people that are resisting you and every issue and every problem and every trouble. And that's again, Tony Richard, Jesus says, in me, you might have peace. In the world, you'll have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. And so we've communicated a message to the people that the reason that you're frustrated and the reason you don't have peace is because
the people who can't go with you to where Jesus is taking you.
Yes, people are resisting. You got to get rid of the haters. Get rid of the haters, and then you're going to be able to accomplish great things. Man,
that's humanism.
That's dumb. That's stupid.
Here's the thing. Dumb. So let me. Can I add a layer here?
Layer.
Let me add a layer because
layer it on there. Just layer it.
Well, because I think this connects with it. Because what you said is I mean, for those that listen to our podcast regularly are able to take that and extrapolate it out into so many different places. Right. So like eventually what I want to get to, I'm going to plant this seed in your brain here. Okay. Is I want to plant this seed that eventually we got to get to this place where he said, let the peace of God rule in your hearts.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
let me add
Yes.
some layers and get there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that if people are listening to this podcast and they don't really understand, they're like, okay, wait, I'm not getting where the declaring the I amness of God and I am not, like, where is, like okay, so how do I express or declare God's glory and his sovereignty and whatever by saying I am not and he is? Okay, because at the core of the Christian religion, we have to understand that God is working. I think, bro, this is so important. Okay.
Yeah.
God is working redemptively on our behalf.
Yes.
In Isaiah 9, we already quoted it, right? He promised a coming ruler who would be the Prince of Peace.
Prince of
And
Peace.
what God is thinking is not peace that we think of peace.
Yeah.
He's thinking that he's saying there's going to be a king whose rule is going to be established in shalom. And then the shalom that his authority brings to the people of his kingdom would never end. And so what I think that we need to remember as we talk about this is that humans want to produce peace, but Jesus came to redeem it. And I think we have to recognize,
So good, man.
I think that we have to recognize that God working redemptively is to restore something that he initially gave us and created us for. It is not something that we can produce for ourselves, because God, in creating, putting his identity in us, putting his image in us, the fact that sin separates us from God causes us to understand that ultimately peace is not achievable outside of God's redemptive work.
There you go.
So
there
his
you go.
Right. So his sovereign power is going to restore all things to wholeness. He's going to restore all things to shalom, right? He's going to restore it to this place of peace. And watch. And so when this Prince of Peace comes, this king that's going to sit and rule in peace, the completion of that peace is never going to be reversed, right? In other words, it will never be incomplete again. In other words, when his rule and reign comes to your life, nothing around you can unshalom you.
Whew. Man, that's so good, bro. That's so good. And it goes back to again, the source of what you're saying, right? The beginning, the beginning of turmoil, the beginning of conflict, the beginning of all that kind of stuff was the introduction of sin.
Mm-hmm.
And, and Romans tells us that the carnal mind, which is which is the byproduct of being birthed in sin, sinful nature, right? Is the carnal mind. And the carnal mind is what? Enmity with God. So
it's not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be.
That conflict is never going to go away just by implementing different environments in your life, whatever that environment might look like.
So if the extension of that is that the flesh profits nothing, the flesh only produces death, the flesh profits nothing, then don't you think that kind of goes back to this reality that to declare God's redemptive authority, his to allow him to rule and reign in our life, requires us to say, my flesh can't produce it. My flesh can't do it. I am not the producer of my own peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that should produce a mindset and a perspective that those things are empty. Those things are have no ability to produce that in us. Only the redemption of God in us and everything that it produces. And that's why we can rejoice in tribulation. That's why the circumstances, Paul said, okay, so here we go. This is one of my favorite scriptures in the whole Bible. Okay. Paul said, I've learned in whatever state I'm in, I've learned to be content. Right? In other words, what I get out of that is Paul saying, this is not something that just comes inherently in our human nature.
Right.
I've had to be instructed by the Spirit of God. I've had to allow his redemptive power to work in me. And then I've had to work of how to apply that to allow the contentment and the peace of God to reign and rule in my life. And so again, I think the byproduct of a and this is not, I'm not going to speak to the secular world. Let me speak to the church world for just a minute. But this, the prosperity gospel, the prosperity doctrine has promoted this message and this image that when you're in right relationship with God, that it's going to produce all of these, these blessings and benefits that are financial or materialistic or whatever. And that's, and when you step into that favor and that blessing of God, it's going to produce all of this kind of stuff, and it's going to bring all of this peace. And all that is a repackaged humanistic view of peace. That's all that is it right? So what is the biblical perspective?
It's us as humans recovering what we lost. It's us trying to go back into the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
And it can only be redeemed by God.
Yeah. And I love what Tony Richard again said. A key component of discipleship is learning, right? Learning to be content, allowing the Spirit to teach us how to be content in whatever state I'm in, whatever condition, as long as I'm with God.
That's right.
Then it doesn't matter what position I'm in or what my situations are or what's happening in my life. I've learned to be content. And can I just speak to leaders right now, like pastors and leaders? We're sometimes, the subtlety of it gets a hold of us sometimes, where we think, if I had a church that had this, if I had these leaders, if we reached a certain size or whatever. And there's a greed component, I think, with like the church growth deal. Like, man, if we could, I remember, you remember the days, bro, of planning a church. You're like, man, if we could just hit 40 people, can you imagine what would happen? And then you hit 40 and you're like, oh,
if we had a full band to lead praise and worship.
Yeah. And then there's like, oh man, 100, if we could just hit 100. Obviously there needs to be a desire to see God do more or whatever. But not if that is the replacement of what brings peace in our lives. If we think, I get this, then it's going to bring peace in my life. And again, that's just the substitute for God wants the peace that I have, I'm giving it to you. That peace is not dependent on any response or situation or environment or circumstance or anything else. It's totally related to the redemptive work of Jesus in our lives. And
let me say this. Biblically, I think this is biblically, in the church, all conflict is the result of individuals not experiencing shalom for themselves.
Absolutely.
So really all that you're talking about is that pastors who don't experience shalom from God seek shalom, wholeness, completeness. We'll be whole when, we'll be complete when, right? And so I think even this is why it goes back to discipleship and a discipling culture, is that if you've what is the pathway toward unity? So many churches try to make the pathway to unity uniformity.
Yes.
And the reality is,
that'll preach.
Right? And the pathway to unity is actually when all people are sharing the same shalom.
Man, bro, that's powerful right there. Right? That's powerful right there. And I'm a huge believer in the importance of this conversation, because the number of people that are on antidepressants is astronomical. I don't remember the exact number, but it's astronomical. And again, I'm not anti-medication. I'm not anti, counseling or whatever. But what I am saying is, I think it is revealing to us that we've not done a good job of helping people to understand how that redemption and the purpose and the plan of God produces peace in us, like you said, not the absence of conflict. And we've substituted uniformity for unity, and we've accepted that. And so we think that any conflict is the absence of peace. It's the absence of unity. And that's not biblical. That's not the plan and purpose of God. Unity is the ability to be able to resolve conflict biblically.
Hey, listen to what Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, prophesied about
Yeah.
Jesus. He said, through the tender mercy of our God, with which the day spring from on high has visited us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace.
Ooh, the way of peace. Wow. That's powerful, bro.
Right.
That's so powerful. And I
So
think this is a great message because again, I think we have brought it down to the lowest level, redemption to the lowest level, which is just being born again to be saved so we don't go to hell.
right.
And this is why
And
discipleship is so important.
And so much emphasis on experiential and not covenantal.
Ooh, right.
So much emphasis because here's the deal.
Bro.
Hey, this morning I was doing my morning prayer and devotion.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna throw something out, and I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna get in trouble for this statement.
Here we go.
Blame it on the Lord. He said, many pastors and church leaders today are no different than the Pharisees who stood up on top of the rooftops to pray. When they post their posts on Facebook and social media about how many people got the Holy Ghost and how many people got baptized and whatever, they're not doing it to glorify me, but they're doing it to shout what they're doing from the rooftop so that all people would see them.
Okay. Wow. It's true, man.
I'm telling you, that was this morning in prayer, in my personal devotion. And basically he said, don't do that anymore. Stop doing it. Because what happened was I said, Lord, as a part of my devotion, I would really like to get off social media. I said, but I see so much of the promotion of what happens in the church and what, whatever. And God immediately rebuked me and said, it's no different than them going on the rooftops to pray their prayers, going in and sitting in the high places. And they want, because that's the way they think they grow, is by keeping themselves, their church, and what they're doing. Look at us. We're rocking and rolling.
Affirmed. Yeah. Being affirmed. Absolutely. 100%. And so like we celebrate the scorecard, right? Whatever we think is the win, that's what we celebrate. And so, again, Tony Richard talking about learning to be content, follow peace with all men, the path of peace, like you talked about with Zechariah. Like, okay, all of that has to do with growth in God, continuing discipleship, letting him continue to transform us beyond just, yes, I'm thankful for the new birth. I want everybody to be born again of water and of spirit. I want everybody to experience the infilling of the Spirit of God. Bro, it's absolutely amazing. It's awesome. But the purpose is not just to save us from hell.
Bro.
It's to make us like him and to give us everything that he's purchased for us through his sacrifice.
And if you're going to post a picture with so-and-so that's got their baptism and Holy Ghost certificate, and post a picture, meet so-and-so, whatever. Yeah, I'll celebrate that with you.
Sure.
But tell the story of how this has helped them find and experience the shalom of God. That's all I'm saying. That's what Jesus came to do. It's not, so listen to this, Chris. And I know we really got to wrap this up. Okay.
It's flown by today. Holy cow.
It's ridiculous. By. We haven't even got to some really good stuff yet.
Flown by.
But let me just highlight a couple of things, and maybe it could be something that, people could think about, and it could, I don't know, maybe we just give them a doggy bag and say, hey, like Cheesecake Factory. You go to the right? You go to the Cheesecake Factory, and the server says, would you like a piece of cheesecake? And you're like, man, there's no way I could even eat it, and say, well, it'll be good at home. That's true.
Right.
Go ahead and box me one up. Like I've done that before. Like, yeah, go ahead and box me one up, and I'll eat at the house. But
exactly.
In Ephesians 2:14, we're reminded that Jesus was made to be, right, in his flesh, our peace.
Yes.
The Bible said he was made to be our peace so that we could be restored to right vertical relationship and right horizontal relationship with our fellow men. So that peace we have with God is also a peace that we have with each other, which only then allows us to be able to fulfill the great commandment which is to love the Lord. And then the second was like, then love your neighbors yourself. And I think also it's important to note that in Colossians, it says that that our peace was purchased by the blood of his cross. Right. And that the new condition, watch this, you who were once alienated and enemies in your mind and by wicked works, yet now he has reconciled in the body of his flesh through death to present you holy, blameless, above reproach in his sight. So I think, man, so when we think about Isaiah 53, right, that talks about he was despised and rejected, right, a man of sorrow, acquainted with grief, and it says we turned our backs on him. He was despised. He was rejected. He carried our sorrows, right? He bore our griefs. The chastisement of our was upon him.
It was upon him. Yeah.
Watch. The chastisement of our shalom.
Of our peace.
And by his stripes we are healed. We are shalomed. The word is shalom. In other words, the chastisement of our shalom was upon him so that by his stripes we could be shalomed. And this, bro, is not just physical body, dude. This isn't just physical body. This is mental health. This is spiritual health. This is emotional health, right? So Jesus is our peace because he's the perfect, complete, whole human that we were created to be but failed at. So the only way that we can have peace is to understand that our peace is in him. And so if our peace doesn't come from any other place, then there's watch of the increase of his government and peace, there'll be no end. If our peace comes from no other place but him and he is in us, then nothing around us can ever again unshalom us.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. So, and that's what Jeffrey Glick mentions, you know, and I think this really gets to the heart of it. And he there's a lot there, but in essence, that our peace really comes from our full trust in him, right?
That's exactly
We've
right.
put our redemption fully in his hands. Our peace comes from trusting, like you said, first of all, trusting in the sacrifice that he made. It's enough.
That's it.
And that our healing comes from the redemptive act that he did of being sacrificed on that cross. The blood is enough, but it can't just be, here's the deal. It can't just be theoretical,
right?
Or theological even. Like,
that's
okay,
right.
I believe in the blood of the cross. The peace of God is a practical peace. It's an applicable peace that he wants to.
And it's a fruit of the Spirit.
Right. We can celebrate.
It's being produced in us by his Spirit.
Yeah. Oh man, he died for my peace. He died that I can be whole and healed. And we don't practice that or live that or keep that working in our lives. And we're missing out on one of the key aspects, bro. I think this is so huge. In the day we're living in, we are missing a key aspect of being born again of water and of spirit. That he's redeemed us, and that our peace wholly and completely is in him, that we trust him in the good times and the bad times. I trust him.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. As new creatures.
Yes, absolutely.
Isn't it interesting, Chris, that what you have to, that's kind of what you have to come to the conclusion of is that he has shalomed us, which is not, again, not it. When you think of it as removing the conflict, it limits the understanding. He has shalomed us. He has completed us. All the stuff that was what we started off with, the conflict that we have with each other, the conflict that we have with the world, the conflict that we have with creation, the conflict that we have with the earth, the conflict that we have with stuff that wants to destroy us, that wants to ruin us, the conflict that we have with the enemy who wants to take us out. Greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world. So why? So that in a spiritual moment, you could quote that scripture and shove it up the devil's nose. No, so that you understand that even your greatest enemy cannot cause you to not be shalomed. And in a practical way, we're experiencing this, right? Jesus is asleep in the boat. The disciples, so here's a practical thing. He's asleep in the boat. They go down and say, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And Jesus says, why did you allow the winds and the waves to unshalom you? You've got shalom asleep here. Why? Because
so good, bro.
Because
so good.
because you felt like it was going to somehow remove, destroy, or to counteract or to tear down. In other words, you thought it had more power to produce what the destruction than I have the power to keep you in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on him. And so today, as we think through this and we walk through this, we have to say, look, he is the Prince of Peace. He is ruling, his sovereign authority is ruling in us and on our behalf. And he is bringing peace, not just to us. This is that stinking, stupid thing that you were talking about earlier about that rugged individualism. Sometimes you just got to leave your haters behind and whatever, and so on and so. No, sometimes you need God to surround you with haters so that you can be humbled. To live fully and to flourish in the peace that he brings.
And right. Absolutely.
Sometimes you need a storm.
Absolutely. And when you don't have the peace of God, this is kind of my final thought here, but when you don't have the peace of God, here's what happens. When you're kind of you're living chaotically, you're feeling chaotic, what happens? You act out, you react to things that are going on around you. And if you look at the life of Jesus, everything that happens, he responded in peace. Right? Again, as you said, our conflict that we have within the body is because people aren't living with peace. If you're
because
walking
they
with
don't
peace,
have shalom.
they don't have the shalom of God, and so they're not walking in peace. And so, it's when somebody's drowning, who's the most who's at the most peril? The person that's
who's trying to save them.
Save that person.
That's exactly
because
right.
because they just go crazy and whatever. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of people, that we're not able to walk through the situations and circumstances of life with that peace of God, and it's causing us to react. It's causing us to respond to things in a way that reflects we don't have that peace, and it's revealing our trust is in something other than the I am. Our trust is in something other than Jesus.
It's counterintuitive for us to declare I am not, because without him we're so empty.
Right.
Without him we're in so much conflict. So we do like you said, the drowning person tries to do everything. They flail, trying to do everything they can to create their own security and their own sense of security. Let me end with this, Chris, if I can.
End it.
I think that this is the beautiful thing about this is this goes back to some of the stuff that we've talked about in the danger of some of evangelicalism that says you're not this enough, go be more that. You're not loving enough, go be more loving. You're not. It only comes when the shalom is something that he brings into your life. This is why we say the indicative creates the imperative, right? Who is God? What has he done? Who am I because of what he's done? How then shall I live? That's the only order that because who he is and what he has done creates us to be something, and then we live out that.
Yes.
We're not living to receive it or living to grasp it or have it or produce it. And so that's why it's interesting. And I want to issue this maybe challenge today.
Do it.
Is to those people that you're trying to reach. Paul in Ephesians 6:15 calls this gospel, the good news, he calls it the gospel of peace.
Mm-hmm.
To those that you're trying to reach, do they sense that the gospel you're bringing them is a gospel of peace?
Man, that's so good.
By who you are and by what you're offering them, do they sense it as a gospel of peace?
So good, man. So good. Jay Jones says he will keep him in the perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him. And that's it, man. So good today. Appreciate all of the interaction and engagement. We went a little bit long, but man, time just flew by, bro. I think this is such an important topic. Mm-hmm. And I think hopefully this affects, we could go down every descriptive peace, love, joy, hope. Like we could go down all of these and show how that this is a discipleship conversation, and hopefully people can see that and how you can live that out. I love how you wrapped it up there in the end of do people around us sense that the gospel of Jesus is a gospel of peace. It's a message of peace for them in a chaotic world. What a tremendous message to our world. So appreciate everybody being a part. Great conversation, great interaction. And if you are interested in more information, of course, check out all of our social media accounts and check us out at thedillinghamgroup.org. We would love to connect with all of our pastors that are listening and see what we can do to help. So thank you for being a part of the Mobilized Church podcast. We look forward to coming back to you next Tuesday around 10 a.m. ish. So you can join us then. Until then, go live mobilized.